Hey kids, howdy and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. Howdy Zoe, we're moving towards the end of our lunar cycle.
Yes.
It's kind of a good news podcast in a way because we're starting a new lunar cycle with the Cancer new moon, and it's the first time I get to say, ooh, there's some really good energy coming in with this lunar cycle, and it doesn't eradicate everything else that's happening this year, but it is it's the best new moon we've had yet.
Okay.
So yeah, there's some things to talk about with that. I keep announcing my anxious attachment class, and I think last week I said it starts this Saturday, and of course it doesn't. It starts this Saturday, and I had a few emails of confusion, so I apologize about that. But yes, my Healing Your Anxious Attachment class starts this Saturday, June 28th. It's a great class. If you've got any struggle with how you relate to others and feel inside of your attachments, take this class. See some of you on Saturday. Now, I had a question that I'm so surprised, though, that this question hasn't come to me through, listeners sending in questions, because it's something that I'm asked about on social media constantly. So here we go. Courtney writes, "Hi, Dr. Michael. Firstly, I'm a huge fan of your podcast, TikTok Daily Astro Alerts. They're clearly written when a lot of times things can get muddy. I wanted to get your opinion on this. For many, many years, I have felt as though when I read a daily horoscope for, and she puts this in quotes, today, it pertains more to yesterday for me, as if I'm living a day ahead, even when it's one of your daily astro alerts and not a horoscope for my specific sign. If it helps, I am Pisces Sun, Leo Moon, Capricorn Rising. I have a stellium in my second house of Pisces as well as in my 12th house in Capricorn." I assume she means there's a stellium in her 12th house. Thank you so much, Courtney. I would say someone asks me this question about once a month through a social media post in a comment.
Yeah, this is something I'm familiar with people
Well,
wondering.
you're familiar with this, though, because when you were my assistant 1,000 years ago, I created a template answer so that when you fielded questions, somebody wrote us or we needed to send that question out.
Yeah, people wonder
there was an
about
answer
this
written.
one.
So it really is this a very frequent question that I'm asked. So I want to say a couple of things about this. First and foremost, one of my sort of go-to answers with this is that like everybody's experiencing the wave of energy at a different moment. It's all about waves and frequency of energy, and we are individuals, so we get it individually. The image I usually give for this, and this is not accurate, it's just a visual to sort of inspire. It's like if you threw a big boulder in the middle of a lake, it would create ripples. But those ripple waves might reach, that piece of land before that inlet, right? And so that's sort of a way of understanding that one source of energy hits different individual places at different times. Now, that's not really an answer because it's not technical or scientific, and I'm half scientist, half mystic. I like answers to be a little bit more accurate. So there is this sort of general sense that we just are on individual timelines, and so energy is felt when it's felt. Now, another thing, though, to go into more detail about this, astrology isn't interested in our calendar, right? It does not know from Tuesday to Wednesday. It just knows flow of energy. And we divide that by these artificial separations that have technical, the earth turns, and so we call that a day. But right there is a good image of just looking at time in front of you and then pull off the grid of the calendar. And that, along with the lake image, will give you a better sense of why individuals feel things at different times. Another thing about how astrology works is that sometimes transits don't connect directly to events that they're reflecting. Sometimes a transit is a portal where we move through an energy that shifts us such that in the future we'll have a new experience because of having moved through a portal. But I think that applies more to specific charts. Like someone might have Jupiter on their Venus, opening them up to more love, but they might not meet somebody in that moment. But anytime after that, they're more ready to draw in love than before because the portal has been walked through. So by the same token of there being no time and the calendar is irrelevant, people walk through those portals before the ding hits of the geometrical peak. The fact that she's Pisces sun might have something to do with this. I've never asked about people's charts when they ask this question, but Pisces is the energy that's so in the flow, it can feel waves before they arrive and after they're behind us. And that might be an interesting experiment to do. But either way, your experience, Courtney, is very, very common. I hope I've answered why to your satisfaction, because the bottom line is, I don't know. It's all a freaking mystery. But because hundreds of people have said they have the same experience, we know it's a thing. Okay, so the new moon in Cancer is Wednesday. It's actually in the wee hours between Tuesday and Wednesday, somewhere around 3 a.m.-ish Pacific time between Tuesday and Wednesday. And so really this new moon is the heart of today's episode. But I was a little activated by what's happening today and tomorrow. There's an enormous amount of traffic today, Monday. Then there's something really big tomorrow, which I would have been talking about anyway. And so we move into this new moon and finish up the lunar cycle we're in some pretty complicated energy. So let's break down what's happening today. Now, I had to double check this before I committed to it on the podcast because there's 4 major transits today, and that's a lot to have on a single day. But I'm going to start with the big one that I would have talked about anyway, and that is the sun in a square with Neptune. The sun and Neptune have an interesting relationship because the sun is conscious awareness itself, and Neptune is the planet that represents the unconscious, the entire unconscious, meaning from, the psychological unconscious of like that which is below the surface of our awareness personally, the unconscious as our connection to the divine and a spiritual practice that's designed to remind you of your connection, and creative inspiration. Everything that we create has to come through the unconscious before it becomes form. And so when the sun and Neptune interact, we're in some major moment of how we're relating conscious awareness to unconscious. So the twice yearly, the 2 times in every solar year that sun squares Neptune, we move through a really big fog bank. Lack of clarity, unknown factors, judgment, challenged. Escapism should be very big today for those of you where that's, part of your tale. So with the sun in this square, we're moving through a couple of days of misunderstandings, things that won't appear as they truly are. And it sets up everything else that's happening today to sort of unfold in a kind of more will slowly be revealed way. I don't know. Let's talk about the other things that are occurring. Mercury is in a square with Chiron today. Mercury in Cancer is very connected to the past, to our family experiences, home and hearth, the past. Cancer is the memory of the zodiac, and because Cancer is also the sign of home and hearth, and Chiron is the planet of wounds that originated like by birth and in your family of origin, today also features conversations, thoughts about such wounded spaces, but again, will be in some foggy confusion from Sun and Neptune. Meanwhile, Jupiter's very active today. There's a semi-square between Venus and Jupiter, which just sort of amplifies everything. We want to party when Venus and Jupiter are in this sort of mild conflict. Jupiter has no bad aspects, but his shadow of overindulgence and not seeing things for their right size is very much about today. And then Jupiter himself by transit, now in territory where he is most happy, is hitting Pluto in the Great Eliminator angle. Now, that last transit is why I am talking about all of this. Because the Sun, Venus, and Mercury transits just describe the energy of, like, the weekend into today and through today. They're like moods, if you will. But the Jupiter in conjunct to Pluto means something is happening in all of our experiences of how we relate to the capability of manifestation and co-creating an extraordinary life with spirit. Jupiter carries that. And in the exalted sign of Cancer and participating in Wednesday's new moon, this little hit, like a fork in the road off the freeway that you have been on, is asking you to just slip into slightly different territory, probably by examining your underlying motives for what you want to create, or examining where your fears are getting in the way because you don't own your personal power enough. And anything that's sitting in the unconscious that keeps you from creating that magnificent life, like thought patterns that say you're not deserving of it. So now that's really interesting that Mercury and Chiron are operating, getting us in touch with wounds, so that if there are any patterns in the unconscious that keep us small, you can look for yesterday, today, and tomorrow to reflect ways that you're opening up and allowing a little more risk and vulnerability. Now, on Tuesday, it gets to my mind, juicier. The Sun is in Cancer, Jupiter's in Cancer, and the new moon will be in Cancer the following day. But Tuesday is the day that the Sun and Jupiter come together by conjunction. Now, that will be very much a part of the new moon that happens overnight, but I wanted to draw this picture for you guys that what we're going through over the weekend and today that might be requiring some, like, looking under the hood a little bit. The fact that the Sun and Jupiter are inching together and hit on Tuesday a conjunction, that's like expansion on crack, right? That's our conscious awareness being completely enveloped by the idea that we are creators and that abundance is our birthright. And then after creating all of that confusion on Monday by the Sun squaring Neptune, the Sun is going to in conjunct Pluto on Tuesday, just as Jupiter did on Monday. Now, if we didn't have the fucking calendar to talk about the difference between sort of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, this would all just be one mechanism of, first, we look at what is stopping us from getting bigger and better. And then we move into an experience of hopeful possibility where we actually see the path of what we have to let go of with the Sun hitting Pluto in the inconjunct. And then the conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter allows for the huge sense of hope, possibility, and confidence. And all of this is what we get to take into Wednesday's new moon in Cancer. So this is some new moon. Really yummy. It's a shame it's being sort of stuck in a really difficult year. But let's break it down a little bit. First of all, it's exact on Tuesday overnight, meaning Wednesday calendar day, the 25th of June, 3:31 a.m. Pacific time. So the dark of the moon is when the moon moves into the sign that the sun is waiting, and that dark of the moon doesn't start until 8:44 p.m. on June 24th. Right? So that's Pacific time, obviously. That's your dark of the moon. You don't want to go into intention setting or manifestation ritual until the moon has moved into Cancer. So that's 8:44 p.m. Pacific, Tuesday night. Then the moon hits, it's exact at 3:31, and then you can set your intentions anytime, during the new moon. And because the degree point is 4 degrees, the moon will be in Cancer for another 26 degrees. Lots of Cancer energy to sort of work with. I mention this because I do like to talk about some of the superstitious astrology that that I personally don't think is valid these days. And one of them was that the dark of the moon back in superstitious times was thought of as a time you didn't want to set intentions, or you wanted to set intentions for something to be taken or gone or end. I think this horse shit. We've been to the moon. Like we some of our stuff is up there. We've left stuff on the moon,
Yes.
right? So we don't have the superstitious relationship with the moon that we did 500 years ago. So my attitude is set intentions whenever you want, but I think the darkest, most fertile and wet time is the best place to set intentions, especially in the Cancer moon that invented gestation. So me loves that for us. Now, Cancer is all about home, family, hearth, self-care, preparation, memory. That's a big one that we don't talk a lot about. But, Cancer rules the family and home, and our memory of our home experience is part of, our challenges as adults. At least in my world it is, because I spend lots of time helping people heal those wounds in my classes. So one of the things that we're always going to be in touch with when we move into Cancer is what's the state of our inner wellness. Like, now, I'm not talking about self-care and taking baths. I'm talking about how do you feel in your body from a perspective of deserving and ready to co-create and make stuff, because Cancer will inspire you to sit it out if you don't feel internally ready. So I'd rather have all of us taking this Cancer new moon energy and saying, I am birthing and creating myself anew in order to meet the demands of my life in the year ahead.
It gives you that patience, you're saying.
Well, it gives you the capacity to care for it. In other words, patience would be like a Capricorn thing, the opposite sign from Cancer. So it's not patience per se, it's the container, the crucible. It's kind of like being in the yummy living room with the comfy couch and the remote by your side and all your snacks. It'd be like, who would want to leave this?
Okay.
But if you use the same idea of a comfy, yummy crucible, you can turn that into the inner space to sort of rise up in a different way. The fact that Jupiter is right there is the game changer. And the fact that it's like 1 degree apart, Jupiter at 4, Sun and Moon at 3, this astrologer who loves precision, that's amazing. Jupiter has been in Gemini for a year. He's debilitated in that sign. I don't talk a lot about that because Jupiter only brings good and expansion, and the challenge of Jupiter in Gemini is just that the thinking mind might get in the way of that. Not at all the case with Jupiter in Cancer. Exalted here, Jupiter's like, ooh, look, You've got a womb, and I've got an idea. Let's plant the idea inside of your womb and hold it dearly, because I will help it grow and birth. And now that's the juicy headline of this new moon. Now, remember what I said about Jupiter on Monday and the Sun on Tuesday. Both of them hit Pluto in the Great Eliminator angle. So those two in conjuncts, 3 when you add the moon, make the secondary theme of this new moon, right? And this is where we get the theme of being in the year of 2025. We will not be able to hold and create beautiful new pieces of consciousness until and unless we are ready to open the hood of our shadow, where power struggles and fights with authority and the desire to stay hidden still live. That last one, Pluto has the underworld. It's like you want to hide something, you shove it in the underworld. Cancer could inspire you to non-movement, and Pluto could keep the door to the basement shut. Don't do that. Allow yourself to be vulnerable this lunar cycle. Cancer allows for vulnerability. It invented it, in fact. And use your vision and desires for the future to do a little bit of self-reflection and shadow work. Do you feel powerful enough to match the vision that you have for your life, that you put into the intentions you set? Mars is the planet that takes anything we intend and walks through the world and makes it happen. Mars has recently moved into Virgo, a place where he can attend to all the details, put complicated things together, allow us to not miss anything when we're looking to dot our I's and cross our T's and make things occur. It's also the sign ruled also by Chiron, like all that precision stuff is from Mercury's rulership. But Mars and Chiron's ruling sign of Virgo also inspires healing of the physical experience. Like literally, the body can be healed in this lunar cycle, where the planet that rules the body is in the healing sign, and the new moon is in that tender, safe crucible that Cancer offers. But in terms of just setting intentions and then having the capacity to walk your walk and make it happen, a sextile between the sun and the moon and Mars is chef's kiss. And of course, it's exact 4 degrees, 4 degrees. And I love that. Venus, in her yummy ruling sign of Taurus, is at 20 degrees during this new moon. And the south node of the moon is at 21 Virgo. That means Venus is easy opposing the nodes of the moon during this lunation. An easy opposition means the nodes, which is the tension of opposites, that's us trying to let go of the past while moving towards the future. Any planet that divides that 180 degrees up into 2 more reasonable chunks of geometry is called an easy opposition. Venus trining the south node means our hearts have done enough work through the retrograde and through being in her lovely home of Taurus. Venus is ready to just open the heart and let go of the past. Like things that you've been carrying around and working on releasing might just drop off from your psyche as you set intentions in this lunar cycle, because Venus has been taking us through the mill for the last 4 or 5 months. And today in this new moon, she helps us let go of the past. And if we put a little work in, sextile with the north node, we can help create from our hearts a world and a vision that lights us up, both physically through Mars and emotionally through Venus. Here's a little extra aside of help and assistance in opening the basement door and marinating in your shadow a little bit to have a deeper release. The new moon is trining Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio. So that means that as we set intentions that we'll hold in our lovely Cancer sort of loving embrace, but also, being asked to go into some shadow work, a harmonious trine with the sort of shadow work mascot of Black Moon Lilith is chef's kiss again, another opportunity to easily go into shadow territory and let something go and let it be inhibition to becoming the most magnificent version of you possible. All right, so now for the hard part, right? We don't get off scot-free. It's not just all of that deliciousness that I just described. We are also going to be bumping up against things like Saturn's restrictions and Neptune's confusion. Right? Both Saturn and Neptune are now in Aries. It has been no mistake that as these two planets moved into Aries, the world out there has gotten on fire, both with war and activism. Like, people are lighting themselves up and countries are lighting each other up. And
Yeah.
that's a function of Neptune and Saturn in Aries. So this is like back to my comment earlier of too bad this lunation isn't in a nicer year. But here's where we get to talk about the importance of this new moon in Cancer vis-a-vis what is going on with our changing world. A square to Saturn does two things for our discussion. One is it makes this week a little heavy with the potential for blocks and obstacles and frustrations to rise up because they're squaring. But the archetypal possibility, when we talk about using the lunar cycle for your benefit, the fact that the new moon squares Saturn tells us that we need to do our best, that the inner wisdom will be brought to the front. It even says if you don't do the right thing, you might get knocked on your ass, because that's what Saturn in Aries will do if we're not rising up to whatever the karmic lessons are for us. The square to Neptune is about not knowing where we're going or what's happening next. Like, Neptune's shadow is fogginess, lack of clarity. And we are certainly living in a moment where we don't know what's going to happen next, and it's frightening. So the square from the new moon to those two planets accounts for the fact that we're in a crazy moment where we must meet it. No one's getting out of this, right? You could hide, but the collective is still on fire.
Yeah.
So this is that new moon where we got to say to ourselves, I stand in my vision, I protect myself, I'm ready to keep myself safe, but also move out into the world powerfully. It may be scary and bumpy, and I certainly don't know what's gonna happen next. But as a member of the human race, I use this moment to set new intentions to both keep myself safe, but get my vision out in the world in order to participate in the magnificent transformation that we're in. The last thing to talk about is our friend Mercury is going to move into Leo on Thursday. Mercury's been in Cancer for the last couple of weeks, and he's not debilitated in Cancer by any stretch. He does take on the qualities of that archetype, so our voice, our thoughts, our perceptions, our conversations with Mercury in Cancer are a little held back, might be a little more tender and emotional. There might be things you have to say that you choose not to because you want to stay on the couch eating the bonbons. What I like about a new moon in Cancer, with Mercury already having left that sign or getting ready to, like 2 days later, is valuable for us because, again, right, I want you guys all set intentions in the Cancer energy that might make you want to feel like keeping safe and staying to home. But the demand of the day is to, activate and do more. So I love the fact that Mercury is moving into a sign where he's ready to roar out loud. But here's the catch. which I think is actually good for us in a way, Mercury will go retrograde here. So he'll spend a lot of time in Leo. And while Mercury retrogrades are not comfortable, they are very valuable. And so this Mercury retrograde in Leo, which is way off, it's not this month, so don't worry about it. In fact, I think the direct shadow starts like the last day of the month. But him moving into Leo while we've just set private intentions that might want us to hold back, Mercury and Leo will be like, nope, I'm ready to roar. I'm ready to get out there. I'm ready to use my activated voice and change the world by shouting things out loud. One of the things I like that Mercury is doing on Friday and Saturday is he will make contact with Saturn and Neptune. Only now that he's in the fire trine of Leo, that connection to Saturn and Neptune will be a trine. So remember, perception is everything. So that while we're setting intentions as Tuesday becomes Wednesday, the planet that we use to set such intentions, Mercury, will be right there in the same room as the sun, the moon, and Jupiter. But when he moves into the centering of self and the personal creativity sign of Leo, and right away trines the planet that's slowing things down and frustrating us, trines the planet that makes things confusing and cloudy and demands that we connect to our spiritual practice and be led by intuition, this is a blessing that Mercury is sort of like kissing the boo-boo of the square that's in the new moon and saying, I'll take it from here. I'm ready to be on fire and be creative. And then, yes, in July, we'll bump up against the kind of, oops, not yet. And we'll talk about that when that comes next month. Meanwhile, it's a really juicy week for beautiful intention setting. Go large, kids. Jupiter is big. Listen, the world will always correct you if it's too big.
Okay.
Jupiter has a shadow of outsized extra, too much. I mean, my attitude is always, ask for forgiveness. Who cares about permission? That's how I've lived my life, and that's a way to approach this lunar cycle. Don't ask for permission. Think big. Set enormous intentions. The world will correct you if need be, but don't miss out on the opportunity to dial into a new moon where Jupiter is hanging out right there with the sun and the moon. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily Astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily Astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
Today we have an email-in dream from Sarah. There's a lot going on in this dream. a lot of points that I think are good for interpretation.
Yay.
Sarah says, "Hi, you two. I've been listening to Michael's dream interpretations and wishing I could have a really cool dream to send you. Well, on the night the moon transited my ascendant, I had this amazing and what I assume auspicious dream.
Well, I love that it happened as the moon was going from sleeping to waking, 12th house to first house. Lovely.
Yeah. I was in this beautiful Victorian home with luxurious carpets and velvet drapes, exotic wood trim and pillars, all in warm, earthy, and inviting apricot and gold colors. There's some sort of mystical fair going on. At the top of the grand stairway, I walked up to a table with a woman standing next to it with oak or bird's eye maple pillars and velvety curtains beside and behind. She said, "Oh, do you have gifts?" As if she was thinking I must have some sort of psychic or spiritual gifts if I'm drawn to the things on her table.
Ah.
As I walked up, I just held out my wrists, arms stretched out to my sides and shoulder height, as if by instinct. And as I did so, my eyes shut and saw these magic colors and puffy clouds of smoke or gas form or something, kind of coming out of my wrists at the wristline area.
Oh.
I saw yellow, orange, and peach puffing out on the inside of my left wrist, and blue, green, and purple coming out of the right, just like puffs of color. Also, there were black lines on the wrist lines on both of them, just like black line drawings or tattoos. On my left hand, and printed on the wrist lines, there is an image of maybe a hand holding a torch, like the Olympic torch with round flame, or something with that shape that has a point at the top. It was also a line drawing like a tattoo. Definitely more lines on the left wrist, and maybe more significance focus on the left than the right. In the morning, as I try to remember it now, I realize it kind of looks like the lines were kind of sheet music lines, like, the music clefs. And then she said, "Yes, you do have gifts." She had seen what I saw in my mind too, I guess. But that was news to me, and that I have any gift. She then said something like, "Well, now you know, and the next step is coming."
The next step is coming.
Yes.
We assume that means arriving?
I would assume so.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I was and am a little worried I wouldn't know what to do. So it's a little unclear for me if this is her. I think this is her remembering her dream. Like, this comes to her later as she's trying to remember
that's
it.
what I get too. That
Okay,
she's
great.
ruminating about the dream in the morning, and she has more sort of information that she's got this next step, and she's worried.
Great. There's a little bit more where she
Sure.
says, "And then there was a jump to something else." What I remember next is, I think I'm in the same house, or a house a lot like it. Beautiful wood, molding, antique, rich colors. I was near an open window in a bathroom or a bedroom, still on the second floor, overlooking a gathering of people outside in a gorgeous courtyard. It had lots of leafy trees, round cafe tables, warm and inviting, high quality, but not formal things. Some sort of daytime party with music. People were wearing more natural cotton clothes, dressed up but not too formal, with a Victorian flair. There's music playing, and I guess I sang along, and people from below were calling up to the window, telling me I had a good voice, and a few of them commenting to each other about it. I felt surprised and wondered what it was supposed to mean, as if something was expected of me. Surprised people recognized something about me, a little afraid of what was noticed. Then I woke up.
What was the third color coming out of her left wrist? Yellow, orange, and...
I think it was peach. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Fabulous dream. You're right. There's so many details.
I mean, there's colors, there's craftsmanship in the area she's in. And I feel like a lot of other people seeing things in her that she did not immediately recognize.
Which is absolutely the theme of the dream in a lot of ways. Do we have any information about Sarah in terms of like her thoughts about her intuitive gifts or we just have the dream?
No, she just like in terms of context is tells us that this was part of a long streak of nights where she didn't get a lot of sleep. And that the moon transited her ascendant. That's it. That's all we got.
Okay. Well, whether she's, phenomenally gifted in the world of mysticism or doesn't think she has any gifts, this dream is about that she has more capacity than she knows. And so there's fear being expressed in the dream about stepping up and stepping into her power. So let's start at the top and inch through and see where we land in terms of creating a foundation. So because she's in a home, we know that we're in some consideration of self. But this is
Right.
a home from quite a few generations ago. A Victorian home would have been built somewhere around 1880, 1890. So that's several generations. So I think that if we're in the consideration of gifts, the fact that we're in a Victorian home might speak to generational gifts, that there's something that's inside of Sarah based on her lineage that perhaps she hasn't stepped up to. And so we start this dream in a very amplified and elevated sort of scenario that lets us know that whatever we're in is grand and large and significant in energy, right? Not small. It's not a shack, right? So she's in a sense of bigness, of like identity, which I love that this is connected to the new moon we just talked about, where it's like you might want to stay small, but the time demands that you get big. So as always happens, so listen, audience, I don't know the dream so is going to pick, but it almost always happens that there's some theme that connects. So the mystical fair that's in sort of both sections of the dream, to me, is speaking to the idea of Sarah involving herself in the public world with a little bit more of her gifts in tow, right? Who goes to mystical fairs? People who are mystical, people who are in the world of, treating others with such gifts and those who are interested in receiving such gifts. So the fact that we're there in her psyche and it's enormous, like Sarah, that's your psyche. It's so big that you needed to create gorgeous colors like apricot and gold and a grand staircase that implies you actually have to climb up to a slightly higher place in your consciousness to get the gift that's available for you. But then when we get there, we know that Sarah doesn't necessarily own the gifts because she has to be asked, right? The guide says, do you have gifts? So this is important to me for the reason that there is no objection, right? Do you have gifts? And Sarah immediately indicates with her physical body that indeed she does. So in that instant, when she goes into this position, which I'll call a mudra, any position that is held, whether it's the fingers that we know from, Eastern practices, she puts her hand out in a sacred shape, and she's already expressing mystical power, right? So it's not like the dream is saying you don't have this and you have to grow into it. It's saying you got this, you might have to trust it more, but look what it is. There are two images that come up for me with the wrists. One is Spider-Man, and the other is suicide.
Okay.
If I think of any others, and so if you can think of any others, let me know. But the first place I went is this idea that Spider-Man's activation of his power to do lots of things, including move around magnificently, he does it by shooting stuff out of his wrists. The wrists are also a place where our life force is very close to the surface. Right? That's why we test for pulse on our wrists, the wrist and the neck. Both the wrists and the neck are places in the body where the passion of blood, the life force that courses through us, isn't sort of buried inside of structures. That's why people kill themselves by slitting their wrists. This is why you take the pulse there. This is why if you put ice on your wrists when you're hot, you might feel cooler. So the wrists are, if nothing else, some kind of chakra. So she closes her eyes and she allows this thing to take her over. And in fact, there is mystical power shooting out of her wrists, and the evidence is these bright colors. I like the idea that the left hand, the feminine hand, is greater. She said that it was more significant in the dream. The colors on the left hand are brighter. Yellow and orange are certainly about creativity, because orange is the second chakra of creation. And yellow is the instincts and the gut biome and our connection to nurturance through the navel. Peach is not a chakra color, but it's certainly a yummy color that might even be thought of as a combo of yellow and orange on some level.
I would say
So her feminine side allows for transformation, creativity. And then the image of the Olympic torch. Now, she was like, maybe, maybe not. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. It might have been this, that, or the other thing. But honey, you said Olympic torch. It's an Olympic torch. That's part of how dream interpretation works, is the words you choose to say to describe the dream are also coming from your unconscious. And the Olympic torch says the games begin. She's the one who has to run into the arena and light the big torch.
Mm-hmm.
So that, to me, is why there's an Olympic torch on her left wrist. It's signifying a need to participate in the world at play, which I could certainly filter through the idea of activism in the crazy planet. I'm just trying to get everybody activated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Sarah's a musician, then the music staff imagery connects to her personal creativity. But it still connects to that even if she's not a musician, right? And what is interesting about music staffs, if she's describing them as just the lines? You know this, Zoe. What do you got with staffs and nothing else?
Possibility?
Ooh, yeah, Zoe. I was going to say silence.
Oh, yes.
But I love possibility. No, it's even better. But let's put them both, right? So that the music staffs is that it's currently silent, which then implies a need to fill in the spaces. And then the emptiness is possibility, and she can write her own song, any song she wants to sing.
Yes.
I love that the very next idea is her worry. She won't know what to do. Like that comes in again at the end of the second scene. So the dream to me then has this as a second theme, which starts here. I was worried I wouldn't know what to do. And certainly the magnificence of the gifts that the dream is expressing would be overwhelming if you thought, oh my God, I have to know how to use all of this. I mean, in 2002, when all sorts of stuff was downloaded into my lungs at an eclipse one evening, my first thought when the phenomena was over is like, oh, fuck. I'm going to have to learn how to breathe into this new expanded lung experience. That, to me, is what's happening in Sarah's dream. She's going to have to grow into that. So when she gets to the second house, it's still the same theme, but to me, the natural colors make it a little more organic and less fantastical than the first scene. So to me, I'm seeing the second Victorian as not generational, but this generation, Sarah, connected to her ancestry a la Victorian home, but now organic, natural. And here we have the music, right? Music's playing, and what does she do? She sings along. What's this dream telling her? You've got a song to sing. And then you sing it in the second dream and people are responding. Remember, they're not people because it's your dream. It's aspects of you. Thoughts inside of you are getting ready or waking up to your magnificence and a willingness to hear the song you have to sing or you're being asked to sing. Then you finish it with another sort of fear response, like, what does this mean? I'm surprised. What does this mean? And honey, it means you have to sing your song. That's what it means. It doesn't have any other meaning.
Yeah.
If I'm singing a song and people are saying, I like you doing that, that's what the meaning is. Do more of that.
Mm-hmm.
So how I'll wrap this all up is, Sarah, you have to decide, like, what are we talking about? What aspect of you, what vision, what song is in you fully that you're not quite ready to own, but really are ready to own? To me, you're already in the room of ownership and you've just brought in the outfit of I don't deserve this. And there's a new outfit right there in the room that you're in. Take off the outfit of I don't deserve this and put on the outfit that's probably peach. And rock your song and sing it loudly. The world needs you.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.